everyone and welcome back. It's Gina from orchidandopal.com, and today we're going to be making a brand new necklace design that I was inspired to create based solely on the contents of the Sparkly Winter Night curated box by Beading School that recently came out. I shared that unboxing here on my channel a couple of weeks ago, so I'll try to link that in the corner if you haven't seen it or if you're interested in checking it out. This box may still be available, but either way I will link to it right down below the video so you can be taken right to it. It contains some beautiful items that go on and beyond what I used in this example necklace below. If it's no longer available, or if you'd like to pick out colors in a different color scheme or pick up items separately though, you can of course find everything in the material list along with links right down below in the description section. As a quick rundown though, we're going to be using two different colors of size 15-0 round seed beads, as well as some 11-0 Delicas, also some half Tilas, 3mm bicones, two of these 7mm flat back crystals, and one of these gorgeous 18mm Preciosa cushion cut crystals. We'll be making this necklace in different segments, starting out with the large focal pendant. Then we'll follow up with making two of those smaller components with the flat back crystals. And finally, we'll put it all together and make that half Tila chain, which I just love. It's very slinky and it is so flexible. It sits nicely around your neck because of the way those little links fit together. And also, before we get started, here's a look at the back of the pendant so you can see that that is actually quite nice looking too, the way that that's all put together and protects the back. One other note about this design, of course, whenever you're working with different beaded components that you're making, you can absolutely just make the single pendant and attach that to your own beaded bail or a different type of beaded rope or chain or whatever you want to do. You can opt to not include the extra two crystal components, or you can include more if you'd like to. You can make a coordinating bracelet with some of the smaller components, or maybe even just the half Tila chain. So have fun with this, and definitely feel free to think outside the box to use these different portions of the tutorial in your own way. As usual, I'll be using my go-to 6-pound 0.006-inch diameter FireLine as my beading thread, and I'll be using a size 11 beading needle, which I recommend an 11 or 12 since we'll be going through these size 15-0 seed beads multiple times and you don't want to break any beads. But now with that out of the way, we'll go ahead and make one of those large focal components first. So now you can gather up your materials, thread your beading needle, and we will jump into this tutorial. We'll begin this tutorial by picking up an alternating pattern of 1 half Tila, 1 15-0, and you can choose whichever color you want to use. The one I'm using in this magenta tone is going to take the place of the silver that you see in this particular pendant. So keep stringing those on until you have 8 of each alternated on your beading thread. And you can start to string those down and leave yourself a 5 or 6 inch tail that you'll be weaving back in. And then when all of those are strung down towards your tail thread, you can take your needle and then sew directly through all of those beads one more time. And by the way, I'm just hanging on to my tail thread with my other hand as I pull this. If you're more comfortable and you're used to keeping your tension with a stop bead, by all means go ahead and do that. I'll be making a half hitch knot here soon, so it's going to kind of secure what we're working on as we get started. So I've gone around all the beads, and I'm just going to go around the next half Tila, and we'll go through the next 15-0 as well to bring those into a full loop. And then right next to that 15-0 where I'm coming out, I'm just going to hold this together with my fingers. I went under that thread bridge to make a loop, and I'm going through the loop to make that half hitch knot, which will sit right before that next half Tila bead. Now let's sew through the next half Tila. And then we're going to step up by sewing through the open hole of that same one. At this point, I'm going to put a needle on my tail thread and I'm going to weave it back in just a little bit and secure it before trimming it off, just to get it out of the way for the tutorial. You can either do that now or you can wait. That's up to you. I just don't want the extra thread hanging out and causing any confusion. So let me do that and I'll be right back. All right, so with the same color 15-0 that we were already using and our threads stepped up to this outer hole of a half Tila, we're going to proceed on with our next step, and that is to pick up one seed bead and then sew through the next open hole of the next half Tila. And that's going to sit closer to that one like this. And then we're going to pick up two of our 15-0s and sew through the next 15-0 seed bead down at the bottom on that original ring of beads and pull. Pick up another two 15-0s, sew through the outer hole, which is also the open hole of the next half Tila, and pull. So we're going to be doing that all the way around. And we're going to start over with our one seed bead going through the next half Tila. And then we're going to pick up two seed beads, sew through the seed bead that's down there at the bottom, pick up another two seed beads, sew through the open hole of the next half Tila, and repeat that again 2 more times. And then when you get to your last one, go through the half Tila as normal and then sew through the next 15-0 and the next half Tila. And pull that nice and tight, and you should have something that looks like this so far. And then to get to our next step, we want to sew through these next 5 15-0 beads as well. So you can just go through those a couple at a time if you want to. And now we're going to pick up an alternating pattern, starting with another seed bead, then our Delica, seed bead, Delica, seed bead, Delica, seed bead, Delica, and one more seed bead. So you're going to end up starting and finishing this section with a 15-0, and then you're going to have a 15-0 in between each Delica with 4 Delicas strung on. And once you have that sequence on, I'm just going to pull that down. You're going to go through the next 5 15-0s like we did before, and it's just going to add that loop of beads right over top of that section of half Tilas. So we'll just proceed on. Going up through those next 2, and then repeating that step again. picking up our sequence until we have 4 Delicas on, surrounded by our 15 O's. Now we'll go down through those next 5 seed beads that we get to. So repeat that 2 more times, adding on those additional sections around the remaining 2 sections of half Tilas, and then we'll meet back for what's next. So at this point, we have our sections added, and we can continue sewing through that next section of Delica beads and 15 O's, and just be coming out of that last Delica in a section, just like that. And now we'll pick up a half Tila, a Delica, and a half Tila. You can pull those down and then look to your next section, and beginning with the Delica, sew through the next Delicas and 15 O's coming out of your last Delica in that section. And I didn't mention it yet, but you may have gathered we're working on the back of our bezel first of all. So this is going to form the very bottom of our piece. Let's keep repeating what we just did. Once again, pick up a half Tila, a Delica bead, and a half Tila, and then sew through the next section of Delicas and seed beads. And now we'll repeat that 2 more times. And make sure you pull all that together nice and snug, at which point you should have something that looks similar to this. And now we're going to go through our next half Tila bead, same hole, and then we're going to step up by sewing down through the open hole of that same one. Okay, for our next step, we're going to be picking up a sequence of a 15-0 and a bicone, and we're going to repeat that until we have 3 of our bicones on. So just add those seed beads in between, and I'm on my 3rd bicone, and then we'll follow up with 1 more 15-0. So you have something like that. You can pull that down, and then you're going to now sew through the next half Tila bead that you get to in that wider section, and you're going to go through that open hole just like that. And now you can sew directly through the next half Tila bead with nothing in between. It's going to start to tighten that up and also bring these sides together for our bezel. And we'll repeat this all the way around. So once again, pick up an alternating pattern of your 15-0s and your bicones. And also sew through the open hole of the next half Tila, as well as the half Tila after that. So we'll do that 2 more times. And here's what we have once that is done. You can see the sides of this piece are starting to come together just a little bit. And now we're going to continue sewing through our next 1 15-0 and 1 bicone. We have another section of half Tilas to add, and these are going to form the top area of our bezel. Coming out of this bicone, we're going to pick up a half Tila, another 15-0, and then a half Tila. Pull those down. Skip over the next 15-0 bicone and 15-0, and just sew through the last bicone and 15-0. And you can continue sewing through the next 2 half Tilas, the next 15-0, and the next bicone. And just repeat what we already did all the way around, so 3 more times. And once again, that was picking up a half Tila, a 15-0, and a half Tila. Pull them down. Skip over the next 15-0 bicone and 15-0 and just go through the last 2. And we're just getting these in place for now. They're not going to be quite in the right alignment, but we'll get there. And at this point, you'll go through your next 2 half Tila beads and the seed bead and bicone to get to your next section. So now just do that 2 more times. And then continue to follow your thread path. We can go through the seed beads and bicones again down here and just be coming out of your last bicone bead in a section. So this one right here is where I'm coming out. And at that point, we're going to be picking up a Delica bead, seed bead, Delica, seed bead, and Delica. So we have this sequence now. And look for your next bicone bead. Go through that, as well as following your thread path out through the last bicone. And we'll repeat that again, coming out of this bicone, picking up a Delica, 15-0, Delica, 15-0, and Delica. Going through the next bicone section and those seed beads as well, and exiting from your last bicone bead. So let's do that 2 more times. And then just tighten that up by pulling your thread and getting that tension more snug, and now you should have something that looks like this. The areas that we just did, those are going to be a connection point for the outer holes of these half Tilas that we started to put in place. But for now, we're going to go around 1 more time, adding in some additional beads in those areas that are going to form the points that you see here on this pendant. So coming out of a bicone right there, we're going to pick up a 15-0 Delica, 15-0 Delica, and 1 more 15-0. So there's our sequence. And then once again, go around your next bicone and seed bead section until you're exiting from the last bicone in that section and go ahead and pull those beads and repeat that 3 more times. So a 15-0, a Delica, 15-0, Delica, and 15-0. Pull them down and then go through your next bicone and seed bead section. And just make sure you don't miss any beads. And we have one more to go. At this point, I'm coming out of this bicone right here, and I'm just going to follow the sequence of beads we just added, going through those and the bicone, and I'm going to go through that next half Tila, and I'm also going to sew through the next 15-0 and the second half Tila in that section. And now we can step up by sewing through the open hole of that same bead. And we're getting close to inserting our crystal, but we can get started with this next step. When we're coming out of that half Tila, we can pick up another 15-0 and sew through our next half Tila. And it's going to be sitting on top of our crystal like that, kind of holding it in place. Next, we want to pick up a Delica bead and a 15-0. I'll go ahead and pull those down. And then looking towards that other section right here that starts with the Delica beads and has the one in the middle, it should be your more inner section. We're just going to sew through that Delica bead that's right in the center. So we're just connecting to that one after we have picked up our Delica and seed bead, and we went through that middle Delica right there. And then we're going to pick up a seed bead and a Delica, and we can sew through the open hole of the next half Tila bead. Pick up another seed bead and sew directly through the outer hole of the next half Tila. And give that a little pull. It's gonna look something like this on the side, and it's starting to come together even more. And I'll go ahead and insert our crystal, and I'm gonna do that so that these corners are going to sit next to these seed bead sections instead of the sections with the half Tilas. So like that. And if you need to, you can just take your needle and just lift those sections of seed beads over the corner a little bit to help that along. And at this point, it may also help you to turn those half Tila beads inward so they sit on top of the crystal in each of those sections. And note that you want to have both of those strips of Delicas and seed beads over the crystal. So when you put the crystal in, if one of those sections is buried or trying to sit underneath, that's where that needle is helpful, just to pop that back out and sit that crystal in there like that. So I'm coming out of the outer hole of this half Tila. That's where we're going to pick up another one of our Delica beads and seed beads. And then go through that central Delica bead in that next strip and pull, and you can pull that over top of the crystal also to get that a little bit tighter. Coming out from that Delica, we'll pick up a seed bead and another Delica, and then sew through your next half Tila bead. And once again, give that a good pull. Pick up a single seed bead this time and go through your next half Tila. And just repeat what we already did in the next two sections. So coming out of that half Tila, we'll get our Delica and seed bead. And make our connection with that central Delica there. Pull that over top of the crystal. Pick up our next seed bead, Delica, going through the next half Tila. Now our single seed bead, and through the next half Tila. And then we have one more connection to make here, so our Delica and seed bead. Going through our central Delica. And just keep pulling this tight as you go. And then our seed bead and our Delica. And we'll go through our next half Tila. We can sew through the next 15-0 and half Tila as well. And this is what you should have so far. And now what you want to do is sew around that ring of beads one more time that you were just working on to reinforce that section over top of the crystal, tightening it as you go. And once you do that, I'll meet you back and we'll continue. There's another step we want to do to angle out these corners just a little bit. All right, so here is what we're looking like right now. There's what the back looks like, the side, and the front. And I'm coming out of the hole here of this half Tila. And we want to follow our thread path. I'm going to step down through that same half Tila, also go through the next 15-0 and the next half Tila. And then I'm going to go through the Bicone and the next seed bead and Delica bead. So right before that central seed bead on this stripe of beads that we did. And we're going to be picking up 3 more of our 15-0s. And then we'll skip the next 15-0 that's in place and just sew through the next Delica and seed bead. We can also go through the next Bicone. But you can see that just adds that little bit of a peak right there above the single seed bead. And just follow your thread path to the next section, coming out of that last Bicone. And then in that next section of beads, you'll go through the seed bead and the Delica. Now you can pick up 3 more of your 15-0s. Skip that next 15-0 and sew through your Delica, 15-0, and then the next section of Bicones and seed beads, exiting out of that last Bicone. There's another little peak, and just do that 2 more times. Coming out of our Delica there, we'll pick up 3 seed beads and go through our next Delica, seed bead, and Bicone section. So now we're in place to add our last 3 15-0s. We'll just continue through that next Bicone section. And continue on through some of these additional beads. And pull that nice and tight And now I just recommend going around that section of beads again at least one more time, going underneath the 3 seed beads that were added in the corner to keep those sticking out a little bit more, and also tightening up this bezel just a little bit more. And once you've done that, you have completed your main focal component. As I'm tightening this, I just wanted to show you something else that is useful for getting those corners to stick out a little bit more. And that is when you get to that section with the 3 new seed beads, come out of the Delica right before those, like that. And then skip that single seed bead down there and just proceed through the next Delica seed bead and Bicone section. And when you do that and start to tighten this up, that'll make those corners appear a little bit more pointed. Once that is done, you can then just make a couple of half-hitch knots and work on securing your remaining thread and trim off your excess. Just go through a couple more beads. Make another one right there. And then we can trim off that extra thread or burn it off, and this is what you should have. Your large focal component is now all done. And next up for this tutorial, we're going to work on creating 2 of these smaller components. I'll show you how to make one, and then you can just back up the video to make the other. And to do that, you'll just want to grab your other color of 15-0 seed beads, those 7mm flat back crystals, and a new piece of beading thread if you need it. And then we'll continue on with this tutorial. And now to begin our smaller component, we are going to begin with a round of 20 of our Delica beads, which we are going to continue in peyote stitch. So let's first pick up our 20 Delicas. And pull those down, leaving yourself a 5 or 6 inch tail. And just double check that you do actually have 20 beads on your thread. And when you do, you can then take your needle and sew back through all 20 of those beads one more time. And also sew through the next Delica bead to turn this into a full loop. And now we'll continue with our peyote stitch. So we'll pick up another Delica bead, skip the next one after the one that we are coming out of, and sew right through the next one, and repeat that all the way around. And I'm holding on to my tail thread as well. I'll be weaving that back in soon. So once again, we'll skip this next bead and sew directly through the next one, creating those areas where we have a bead that's sticking out. And then once you get back to the beginning, you can step up by sewing through that next Delica, the one that is sticking out on that new row. And at this time, we're going to continue doing 2 more rows just like that in our 15 O's. And I'm going to use the color we were using in that larger pendant that we just made. And then the silver over here will just be my accent that we'll use at the end of these components. So let's continue by picking up a 15-0. This smaller size is of course going to cinch up our bezel that we're making, and this is going to form the front of the bezel that sits right around the top of our crystal. And we're just going through each of those delicas that are sticking out, inserting one 15-0 in between each delica. You can start to pull this as you go, and after each new bead that you add, and once again to step up, just go through that last Delica bead in that round, and then sew through the next 15-0. And when you pull this, you're going to get this more cylindrical shaped bezel that's starting to form, with this area cinching up a little bit on top. Right now, I'm going to put a needle on my tail thread and weave that back in a little bit and then trim it off so it's out of the way for the video. Then I'll meet you back and we'll complete our next row of peyote using 15-0s. All right, so with the tail thread tucked in, we can continue on with our next row of peyote. I'm going to pick up another 15-0 and this time sew through the next 15-0 that we get to. That's going to cinch this up even more and make it small enough so our crystal will not fall out of our bezel. And just keep cinching this up as you go. We're going to go around this again to tighten it up, but it always helps to start tightening it as you go at this point, since this is our last row. And I'm going to step up, going through that last 15-0 in the lower round and up through the new one that's sticking up a little bit, and just turning this and pulling slightly. And you can see that we have something like this. It's going to sit just on top of our crystal. And before we put that in and tighten up the back, just go around that area where you have all of these 15-0s, catching them, say 2 at a time on both of these rows, all the way around at least once more, just to tighten up that area. And then we'll follow our thread path to get towards the back of our bezel and be coming out one of our Delica beads that's sticking out at the bottom. All right, so now that that's tightened up, we'll just weave back through our bezel, and I'm going to go down this way through that Delica and back this way through the next Delica so that I'm coming out one that is sticking out a little bit. At this point, we can take our flat back and insert that face down into our bezel. It should fit nice and neat right down there, centered like that. And I'm coming out of this Delica right here. I'm going to continue on with 2 more rows of peyote stitch using the same 15-0 seed beads. So I'm just going to go through the next Delica that's sticking up, just like we did on the front. And I'm just holding that crystal in place until we get this tighter so that it's held in by the actual bezel. But this is just helping to shape it right now. And then getting back to the last Delica in that round, and I'm going to step up through the next 15-0 and start to pull this. And it's starting to cinch around the back of the crystal. And at this point, we can do our final round of peyote stitch with these 15-0s. So picking up a 15-0, going through the next one. And again, just tightening this as we add each additional bead. And then we'll step up, going through the next two 15-0s, holding this down and giving that a good tight pull. And we'll go around these 15-0s again, just to reinforce this back area. And I just like to go like 2 at a time and tighten that up each time I'm going through another section of beads. So here's what the back looks like, and here is what the front looks like. Your crystal should be nice and snug in there and centered inside that bezel. And now we can just step up through one of these Delicas, and I want to be coming out of the Delica that is on the bottom most row. So if I flip this over, now I'm coming out of that one right there, and that's going to set us up for our next step. So to continue on with our same color of 15-0s now, we're going to pick up 2. And then we're going to be adding some beads around the side this time. And if you look straight ahead to that same bottom row, not the one that is sitting diagonally from the one that we're coming out of, but the one straight ahead, just go through that one and insert those 2 seed beads around the side. And we're going to do that around the entire thing. So pick up 2 more 15-0s and sew through the next Delica bead on that same level. And when we get to our last one, we'll go through our Delica as normal and then sew up through the next 2 15-0s. And then now this is where I'm using the silver color as an accent. I'm going to, in this first open section between the other 15-0s, pick up 3 in this next color and then sew through the next 2 15-0s. It's gonna make a little point like that. And then in the next 4 sections, I'm going to just add 1 15-0 in the other color. So now we're back to the point where we want to pick up 3 of our 15-0s and insert that. So that's opposite of the other section that we did to start out. And we've got our point now on the other side. And in the next 4 rows, we're going to insert our single 15-0 just like we did already on the other side. And now I'm back to where we started. It's pulled nice and tight. Here's what we have. There's the back. And what you're going to do now is just back up the video if you need to and make one more of these components just like this. I'm going to leave the thread intact that I have because right now I'm going to show you how to add this component to our large pendant. And I'm just going to do that by using the same thread that's already in place. So let me get set up for that and I'll be right back. All right, everyone, and welcome back. So I'm all set up. I have my half Tilas and my large pendant, and what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to connect this on one side, so you'll do the identical thing on the other side when you're ready. I'm coming out of the peak seed bead right here, so I just went up through that one. And at this point, we're going to pick up one of our half Tilas, which is going to sit like this. And to surround that one on the side, we're going to pick up a 15-0, a Delica, and a 15-0. And you're welcome to use either color of your 15-0. I'm going to go with the color that we use primarily, the color A. And I'm just pulling those beads down to that single seed bead at the peak. Just like that, I had gone through the open hole of that half Tila while I was talking, and now I'm going to pick up a 15-0 in my other color and another half Tila and pull those down. That one's going to sit on the opposite side, and just like we did in this sequence, I'm going to pick up a 15-0 in the first color, a Delica, and a 15-0. And then I'm going to sew through the open hole of the same half Tila that we just added. I'm also going to go through the same peak 15-0 on our smaller component and continue through that next half Tila. And I'm going to sew through those next 3 beads on the side. Again, just keep pulling it tight as you go. And then I'm going to go through the half Tila and that 15-0 bead that's in the center of the half Tila section. Now let's pick up another one of our 15-0s in color B. And taking a look at our pendant, we're actually going to be connecting to one of these 15-0s on the strips here on the bottom at the side. And we're going to be connecting this section to the center 15-0 right there. So pick one of those to go through. And if we're going to connect it like this, that means I'm going to go up this way. So just make sure you're facing in the right direction and start to pull that together, and it's going to be situated in this manner. And I'm going to pick up one more 15-0 in the color B, and we're going to complete the other side. So it's going to be sitting like that. We're going to connect this to that 15-0 B in the center of the half Tilas, going in this direction. So we're just looping it around. And when you pull that tight, you can see that that's your connection point right there. And then when you make your other one, it will be sitting on this side of the pendant. So you'll have your 2 sections coming up and out of 2 adjacent portions of your pendant, with this portion hanging down a little bit. So I'm just going to go around this little section again one more time to reinforce it. Up this way. And over, and I'll continue on through that next half Tila. And through the next 3 beads. And I'm actually going to knot off my thread at this point because I'm going to start with a new thread to show you how to begin the chain portion. with the half Tilas on the other side of this small component. So I'm just going through a few more of these beads now, and I'll make another little knot going under that thread bridge, going through my loop, going through a few more beads. And I'll probably just go through here and trim that off. So that's how you complete one side of the pendant and the connection point between the small component and the large one. And like I said, you'll just do the same thing coming out right there on the other side. And next I'm going to start with a new piece of thread and we'll get that chain going, which will finish up our necklace. So now we can continue by making that chain, and you'll be making this as long or as short as you'd like to finish your necklace, coming out of the left-hand side of that center 15-0 at the peak of the component. So I'm going to be picking up one of my half Tila beads, and then we'll continue making this look just like this portion we did down lower on the necklace. And we'll get a 15-0 color A, Delica, and another one of those 15-0s, and then sew down through the open hole of the same new half Tila and pull that to your 15-0. Then pick up a 15-0 color B and another half Tila and pull those down. And then to go around the side over there, we'll pick up a 15-0, a Delica, and a 15-0. And then sew through the open hole of that half Tila and pull those down. And then you can sew through the 15-0 that's on the corner of the small component again, as well as the next half Tila, to loop around and connect all of these beads. And now I'm going to go up through those next 3 beads on the side. Then sew through the half Tila and come out of the 15-0 that's in between the 2 half Tilas. At this point, we're going to pick up 3 of our secondary color 15-0s, and we're going to go back through that same 15-0 again, heading in the same direction to create that little picot, which is going to be a connection point between this segment of the chain and the next half Tila segment. So I'm going up through the 15-0 and then over to be coming out of the one that's on the very end. And we're just going to keep repeating this for the entire length. So we'll do one more together. We pick up a half Tila, it's going to sit over there. We'll get our 15-0, Delica, and 15-0 and sew through the open hole of the half Tila and pull that down to our beadwork. We'll pick up a 15-0 in the other color and another half Tila, and then another 15-0 and Delica and 15-0. And then we'll sew through the open hole of the half Tila as well as the next 15-0 and the next half Tila. And pull that nice and tight. And then we'll continue by sewing up those 3 beads on the side. And then over through the half Tila and the 15-0 that's in the middle. Then we'll follow that up with our 3 15-0s in our color B. And we'll sew back through that same 15-0 that we're currently coming out of. Now we'll sew up through the next 15-0 and then sew through the one at the top. So that's all there is to making the chain portion for the necklace, just like you see in the example. And I have about 29 of these half Tila segments on my example piece. It's about 18 inches in length, a little bit more probably with my clasp section. But just like you did before, you can back up the video if you need to continue on with the chain, or just keep going and do that on both sides. And once you're done with that, we'll meet back and I'll show you the simple way that I decide to add a clasp. And welcome back. So once you have the length of this half Tila chain done and you're satisfied with that, you can end at a point where you have a picot of some 15-0s on the end. And I'm using one of these pinch clasps, which is actually from Beading School. They've got so many different high quality clasps and other metallic components. This came from one of their past boxes. And it's similar to the one in gold that I used for the example piece. And very simply, what I'm going to do is just pick up 5 15-0s in the silver color, and you can just choose any side of the clasp that you want. And this is, of course, if you want to sew the clasp directly onto your necklace. If you would like to, you could also use wire guards, which give you the opportunity to change out your clasp more easily. You could make your own beaded toggle or anything else you'd like to do. So this is just one example, very simply, of how you can attach a clasp like this. I'm picking up 5 more 15-0s, and on the other side of the clasp, I'm just going to go back through that 15-0 that's at the center of that picot, just like that. And now I'll just sew directly through these beads and that side of the clasp again, just strengthening that loop. And I may even go around one more time. And then I would just do the same thing on the other side and attach this side of the clasp using the same method, 5 of the 15-0 seed beads on either side of the loop of the clasp. Strengthen it by going around 2 or 3 times, and then begin to make some half-hitch knots and weave back through your piece a little bit, hiding your thread and any knots you made, and trim off your excess. So that wraps it up for this tutorial. I want to thank you all so much for being here. I'm always glad when you can join me, and if you decide to try this or have given it a try, please feel free to leave a comment down below. Also, be sure to give the video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe and share the video with your other beading friends. As a reminder, the link for this Beading School Sparkly Winter Night box will be located right down below the video, as well as the full list and links for all the materials that you'll need, which you can find separately at Beading School as well. That's all for now. I hope to see you all again real soon, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous rest of your day, and as always, happy beading!